The Science Behind Juju, Voodoo and Other African Dark Magic. Part 1. The Roots of Power. Origins, Foundations, Cosmology, and Hidden Science of African Mystical Systems. Chapter 1. Before the First Spell. The night the elders spoke of the beginning, the fire was the only witness. Sparks rose into the blackness like messengers trying to return to a sky that once held them. The drums were silent. The moon was watching. And every child, every hunter, every mother leaned in, because the old man in the goatskin cloak never told stories unless the world itself seemed to be listening. He lifted a handful of dust and let it slip through his fingers. "This," he whispered, "was the first thing our ancestors ever feared. Not a creature, not a god. Dust. Silence. The invisible." Long before the first charm was carved, or the first shrine erected, humanity faced a far more profound terror. The awareness that the world held forces they could feel but could not see. The wind that arrived without warning. The sickness that struck without cause. The voices that rose in the mind when the night was deepest and loneliness pressed hard against the ribs. In this cinematic moment, standing in the shadows of a fire-lit circle, one understands the simple truth that shaped African magic. Human beings needed to make sense of the invisible to survive it. This is where our story begins. Imagine the earliest humans on the continent, tens of thousands of years before written language, surrounded by a landscape that pulsed with life. Africa's forests whispered. Its rivers roared. Its storms cracked open the sky like a drum announcing war. Every sound was a lesson. Every silence was a warning. Every shift of light or heat could mean survival or death. Humans of that era lived inside a world alive with energy, pattern, and motion. They had no technology except stone and instinct. So they developed what we now call pattern detection, an evolutionary superpower. Today, neuroscience identifies this as the brain's default behavior, to find meaning in randomness. Back then, it was not a cognitive quirk. It was a weapon. A leaf moved in a bush. The early human didn't think randomness. He thought predator. A storm rumbling across the plains might not be explained by atmospheric pressure. Instead, it was understood as the displeasure of something larger, something listening. Before religion, before magic, before science, there was interpretation. And interpretation, when repeated, becomes belief. Belief, when shared, becomes culture. Culture, when ritualized, becomes magic. But what made African magic endure was not the story. It was the results. One of the most remarkable truths, uncovered today by anthropologists, physicists, neurologists, and historians, is this. Ancient rituals survived because they worked on the brains and bodies of the people who practiced them. Not in a vague, metaphorical way. In a measurable, physiological way. Take fear, for example. Modern neuroscience reveals that the human brain responds to fear by activating the amygdala, flooding the body with hormones, sharpening perception, increasing vigilance, and creating a state of heightened sensitivity. In ancient Africa, fear wasn't simply an emotion. It was a tool. Elders, priests, and diviners discovered, centuries before the word neurology existed, that fear could be engineered. A chant spoken in a low voice. A sudden silence during a ritual. A mask that hid the human face and replaced it with something monstrous or divine. Long before Freud, long before behavioral science, priests understood that a terrified mind becomes highly suggestible. When a curse was pronounced, the victim's nervous system completed the ritual. Fear became the unseen collaborator. Here is the oldest secret of dark magic. The mind is not a witness. It is an accomplice. But this is only one layer of the story. Because while psychology explains some things, it cannot explain all things. Across Africa, from the Yoruba forest to the Congo riverbanks, from Dahome's hidden temples to the Ashanti courts, early humans observed something deeper. Life itself was responsive. Not passive. Not neutral. Responsive. The wind didn't just blow, it answered. Fire didn't just burn, it spoke. Animals didn't just roam, they navigated with intention. Dreams didn't just entertain, They warned. Today, the language of physics uses different words: fields, vibrations, resonance, probability, entanglement. But the essential idea is the same. The universe is not silent. It reacts. African cosmology was the first system to treat the unseen as a network of forces. Forces that could be influenced, redirected, negotiated with. This was not superstition. This was observation. People noticed that two objects placed on a shrine could change the emotional state of those who prayed there. They saw how certain chants altered breathing patterns. They witnessed how particular herbs affected consciousness. They understood intuitively that energy, whether emotional, biological, environmental, or spiritual, could be shaped. Before the first spell, there was a principle: everything alive is connected. Not symbolically, literally. When Western science finally caught up with the discovery of electromagnetic fields, biofields, mirror neurons, quantum entanglement, and genetic memory, Africa's ancestors had already built entire cultures upon these truths. Yet they expressed it in a different language. Instead of frequencies, they said spirits. Instead of consciousness states, they said trance. Instead of psychological suggestion, they said curse. Instead of ancestral DNA memory, they said the ancestors walk with us. Different vocabulary. Same phenomena. This is the tension that fuels the modern misunderstanding of African magic. Outsiders mocked what they could not translate. Scholars dismissed what they did not measure. Colonizers feared what they could not control. But long before any of them arrived, Africans had developed a complex, empirical living system for navigating the invisible architecture of reality. A system of knowledge that worked. A system that still works. A system that shaped nations, guided families, ended wars, healed wounds, destroyed enemies, and built empires. And so the real question is not how did magic begin, but something far more difficult, far more unsettling, far more scientifically profound. What if magic began the first moment humans realized they were not alone? And if this is true, then the deeper question emerges, dark and brilliant at the edge of thought. What happens the moment a priest enters trance and reaches out to whatever has always been reaching back?